Hi everyone, it's Agnieszka from 5-Minute Language. Welcome to my channel. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. So today's video is all about learning Japanese. I first started to learn Japanese about 3 years ago before I went to Japan, and I had about 3 months to make sure that I can understand some basic phrases, that I can say some basic phrases, that I can read as much as I can. I know 3 months is not a long time, but I did manage to get some basic knowledge of the language. I then unfortunately gave up because I didn't have any kind of external motivation to learn the language. But this year, 2020, I am really determined to continue to learn Japanese and continue to make videos about Japanese. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about Hiragana. So when you're learning Japanese, probably the first thing that you will come across is the fact that there are many different alphabets in Japanese. In fact, they're not all called alphabets. Hiragana is technically a syllabary, it's not an alphabet, it's kind of like a phonetic alphabet. But when you pick up Japanese for the first time, you might be a little bit confused because you will hear about hiragana, katakana, kanji. So today we're going to tackle hiragana. I'm going to say a little bit about what it's for, and I'm going to tell you my top tips for learning hiragana. So hiragana has 46 base characters, so it's not too bad. When you think about kanji, there's thousands of them, but in hiragana you only have 46, and you can probably write most Japanese words in hiragana phonetically, even if they actually use kanji to write them properly. Hiragana is a way of writing phonetically, but it's also used alongside kanji for things like verb endings, adjective endings, particles, and things like that, things that don't have a kanji equivalent. Sometimes you will also see things like kanji with hiragana written above it, and that's basically something that will tell you how to pronounce the kanji, because when you look at a kanji, there is no way really as a beginner to figure out how it's pronounced. Maybe as you get more advanced you can kind of make those associations, but that's not something that's happened to me yet. I'm still a beginner. So when I look at a new kanji, I have no idea how to pronounce it, whereas if I look at something written in hiragana, I know how to pronounce it because I know how each hiragana character is pronounced. So the first question you may be asking is, do I learn hiragana, kanji, or katakana first? So I'm going to say learn hiragana first, because once you've done that, that will basically allow you to write all sorts of words in Japanese. It will open up lots of opportunities to you, and things will become a lot less overwhelming. Some people say start with the kanji at the same time, which is fine, but in terms of hiragana and katakana, the two phonetic ways of writing in Japanese, I would definitely recommend hiragana because katakana is not really used as frequently. I'm going to make a video separately about katakana, so make sure you check it out when it's ready. But start with hiragana. It's actually really easy to learn it. You can probably learn it in 1 weekend. I know that sounds really ambitious, and some people will say you probably need 3 or 4 weeks to learn it, but actually you can do it in 1 weekend if you devote enough time to it and if you get enough practice. So there will be 4 different components when it comes to learning hiragana. This is not any kind of theory, just something that I personally experienced, my take on it. You might find it useful. So first you will need to learn obviously what each hiragana character looks like, all the different strokes that make it up. You will have to learn how to write it yourself, and also what's the order of writing it is. So some of the strokes will be written in a specific way, and you will need to kind of familiarize yourself with how to write it. The next component of learning hiragana is about pronunciation. So once you know what each character looks like and how to write it, you will need to know how it's pronounced. The third component is about memorizing how things are written and also how they are read. So you will need to memorize the look of the characters and the way they're written. And then you will need to learn how to memorize the pronunciation of each character. So I would say components 2, 3, and 4 should be done at the same time. You want to be learning how to write something, how something looks, but also its pronunciation. So how do you say it at the same time? So this is important because it will prevent you from kind of translating every hiragana character in your head when you look at it. So instead of looking at it and then trying to find in your memory the pronunciation of that character, you will look at it and you will kind of hear the pronunciation at the same time. So when you're learning a language that uses the same script as English, so for example, if you're learning French, often you will look at words, and one of the problems that people often face is translating in their head. So they will be translating into their native language and then back to French. Whereas with learning hiragana, you might have this problem of recognizing a character and not remembering how to pronounce it. So when you learn pronunciation and writing at the same time, you will reduce the likelihood of that happening. Okay, so once you know all the hiragana characters that exist, once you've seen them on a page and you know how they're written and how they're pronounced, how do you actually memorize it? So how do you do those steps that I've just mentioned? How do you know how to associate the sounds with the writing? So there's quite a common technique which involves mnemonics, and it's basically making associations with images or ideas that exist sort of outside of the syllabary, and associating them with the pronunciation or the way the characters look. So for example, when you look at the hiragana character ni, it kind of looks like a knee. It looks like the knee, which is the middle part of your leg, and you can kind of memorize the pronunciation that way. There's also a sound called ki, and you can kind of draw a key, so the thing that you use to unlock the door, you can kind of draw it into the character because the character kind of looks like a key. And it's a massive coincidence, but it's something that's extremely useful when you're learning Japanese, when you're learning hiragana. So sometimes you will obviously have to stretch your imagination. You will need to see things that are not exactly there. So one way of learning the character I in hiragana that I've seen recently was to eels next to each other. So you will have to sort of visualize that there are two eels next to each other. They're kind of swimming in opposite directions, and the character kind of looks like that. So it's pronounced E because of the sound E in the word eel. So you will need to stretch your imagination, but it's a really fun process, I find, and I definitely recommend it. So how do you learn the rest of the alphabet? Do you have to come up with those kind of images and associations yourself? You don't. You can use an app to do it. One app I have used personally was Memrise, and Memrise actually helped me learn hiragana in one weekend. This is not a sponsored video. I have worked with Memrise before, but this is just a recommendation based on my experience of learning Japanese. Okay, so the next step is learning the vowel characters. So there are 5 different vowel characters in Japanese. They are really easy to memorize. They are essentially the same vowel sounds as exist in English, pretty much. So it's going to be quite easy. And then you move on to learning the other characters which involve the vowels. The rest of the alphabet will be basically combinations of those vowels and consonants attached to them at the start. So for example, ka, ki, ko. So you have the vowel sound at the end and the letter K at the start. So I definitely recommend that you download a hiragana chart, which is basically a grid with all the different characters. They are grouped together, and that you basically follow the groupings when you're learning the characters. So first learn the vowels, then learn all the K combinations, then all the G combinations, all the different consonant combinations in groups. That will make things easier for you, I think. Okay, so this is quite simple actually. The main tips I wanted to give you were about mnemonics and making associations with images and sounds, to memorize things using an app to help you with that. Memrise is a great idea. It also gives you opportunities to practice. But another tip I want to give you is to write things down in hiragana. So I know that writing by hand is not something that we do on a daily basis anymore, but I personally find that it really helps with the memorization process when you write something with a pen on a piece of paper, especially when you're learning a language that's very unfamiliar and very different, and a language that contains a completely different alphabet. So learning hiragana, in my experience, is easier when you basically write things down. When you know some words in Japanese, even if they use kanji to write them down properly, you can write them phonetically using hiragana. So this is something that I personally did. I used a notebook and I basically thought, oh, what words do I know? Konnichiwa. How do I write that out in hiragana? And you can do the same with pretty much any word in Japanese. Okay, the next step in learning hiragana, so other than the memorization and the practice, is practicing recall. So when you see a character, you need to be able how to pronounce it, or if you need a character, you will need to know what character is associated with the sounds that you need to write. So practicing recall is very useful when you've got a set of flashcards. You can do that. You can write pronunciation on one side and then the hiragana sign on the other side. And basically that way you will be able to practice recalling that character. Okay, and the final tip is about reading children's books and simplified books, because children's books often will contain some kanji, but as a beginner, obviously, it will take you a while to learn the kanji, but also there will be kanji that you know and then other kanji that you won't know, which will prevent you from understanding what you're reading or preventing you from looking things up in a dictionary, for example. So you can get children's books or simplified readers that have hiragana written above the kanji to tell you what the pronunciation of the kanji is. And that can help you with the learning, because you won't be kind of discouraged by the fact that there's so many kanji in what you're reading. So I definitely recommend this as like a way to practice your hiragana. So I hope you guys enjoyed these tips. I'm going to make another video about learning Katakana, which is the other Japanese syllabary, and the tips will be very similar, but there will be some differences, and obviously I'm going to explain what katakana is used for. But if you've got any tips on learning hiragana, make sure you share them in the comments below. I would really appreciate it, because I know there's lots of people online learning Japanese at the moment, so make sure you share your tips with the community. And thanks for watching. Bye!